All right, let's talk about Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys, who suffer another disappointing postseason loss. It's become a trend now for a while with the Dallas Cowboys. They won the Super Bowl in 1995, the year I was born, have not been back to the conference championship. They have yet to have a season where they've made it past the divisional round. And listen, the whole history of all of that could be an interesting video. I don't really have time to get into all of that this morning. I got to get down to Tampa and watch the Buccaneers hopefully beat the Eagles tonight. But, for now, I figured it could be a fun video to just go through and look at the Dak Prescott era Cowboys, right? Because, again, things that were happening when Tony Romo was quarterback or even before that. I don't know if it's fully fair to talk. Again, could be an interesting video, but I just want to go over that stuff. So we're going to go through each playoff run for Prescott that's ended in disappointment and talk about kind of what went wrong in all of these games. First, the 2016 divisional round loss to the Packers. The Cowboys were 5.5-point favorites. That's what the minus 5.5 over to the right. I know it kind of looks like the Packers are 5.5-point favorites. It was weird. I couldn't figure out exactly how to make the graphic work, but no, Cowboys were 5.5-point favorites. The line you see at the end of each of these is going to be what the Cowboys were, not what their opponent was. So, this was a game that they were supposed to win. Aaron Rodgers, if you remember, was having maybe his best run he had in Green Bay, where, that was their run-to-table season. He threw a Hail Mary, and they beat the Giants in the wild card round. And then here against against Dallas, they were able to have that crazy back-and-forth game. If you remember, the Packers got up big. It actually kind of started off similar to this most recent playoff game where Packers take a big lead. The Cowboys fought back. They actually tied the game, but then there was that Jared Cook catch at the end. Really good play by Aaron Rodgers. And even a play where Aaron Rodgers got hit when he was blindsided, but held on to the football, which was crazy towards the end there. I do think you can put some blame on Prescott. Prescott made some mistakes, especially early on in this game, and there was a lot of talk of if they went back to Romo, do they win? Because if you remember, that was Prescott's rookie year. I think Prescott kind of understandably had a bit of a tough start to the game and played really well in the second half to bring him back into it. While I would say this was a disappointment from what he did all season long, I wouldn't necessarily say this means he's a playoff choker alone, right? Because it's your first playoff game playing in the divisional round. Sometimes it's better to play your first playoff game in the wild card round because you don't have to go through that. But definitely a disappointing loss for sure. Next up is 2018. They did not make the playoffs in 2017, and then in 2018, they had a win here, and they actually were underdogs when they went. They beat Seattle in the wild card round. They then lost to the Rams in the divisional round, and this, I would say, was a pretty good playoff run, actually. This is a feather in the cap of, Dak Prescott here, where, they were underdogs against Seattle, and then they were massive underdogs against the Rams. They were 7.5-point underdogs. That Rams team did go to the Super Bowl that year, so they lost and played relatively competitive football in that game. It's hard to really look at it and say that it was listen, Rams were the better team. Rams won the game. Kind of the argument for the Cowboys is they play great in the regular season, but then choke in the playoffs. This time, they actually maybe overperformed their regular season expectations. But then we get into the Mike McCarthy years. Yes, there's a 2-year gap. In 2019 and in 2020, they missed the playoffs. Didn't get it again until the 2021 season, which is kind of surprising. I feel like you think about Prescott making the playoffs every year, but he's actually only made it 4 out of 7 years, which is still admirable, but not otherworldly. Not what I feel like perception might be. Not what I thought, at least. This one was a tough loss. They were favored in this game against the 49ers, who we'll talk about again in just a second. But this was a game, this was the kind of infamous at this point Dak Prescott quarterback sneak play where they try to do a quarterback draw play to try to quarterback draw to gain some yards and hopefully spike the ball. But then, some people blame the refs, but really I blame the Cowboys for that. They boxed out the ref. How was he supposed to touched the ball. I made a whole video on that. It's one of the highest viewed videos on this channel right when that happened. But it was a weird game where the Cowboys were favored to win, but this was one of the games that everyone was picking the 49ers to win, even though they were technically underdogs, and they did win. It was a good matchup. The Niners were able to run the ball really effectively on this one, and definitely maybe a sign of things to come for Dallas, as this was this was another game they were favored to win. So to have two now games that they were favored to win and did not. Then in 2022, we had what was probably a banner year, at least a banner game for Prescott. Also, to fact check something in real time, earlier I said that Prescott only made the playoffs. I believe I had the numbers wrong. I made the playoffs 5 times, but yeah. Anyway, the game against Tampa Bay, they were actually just 3-point favorites. If you remember, there was a lot of people feeling like Tampa Bay might be a potential upset there. They were coming off of that big Carolina victory where Brady threw for 400 yards and Evans had 200 yards, and they kind of looked like they could do something. Turns out they didn't. They were not that good. Again, hoping tonight goes very differently than that one went for me personally. But for the wild card game in general, this was Prescott was great in this one. They were scheming stuff up. Kellen Moore was really good in this one. So that was the game that you thought, oh man, is Dallas going to do something? And then they lost to the 49ers. But again, they were 4-point underdogs there. The 49ers, who might have won the Super Bowl if Brock Purdy stays healthy, right? Like, they had that opportunity. Hard to really look at. And, it was a competitive game once again. There was that weird Ezekiel Elliott as a center thing. So that was funny. But as a whole, this was I would not say this year was a choke necessarily. This was them living up to regular season expectations, maybe even going a touch above regular season expectations. But that brings us to here, which is 2023, the wildcard loss to the Packers, where this was the biggest choke of them all, right? Because at least with the other Packers, like the 2016, which is Prescott's there, McCarthy isn't, although actually McCarthy is there, just on the other sideline. Losing to the Packers in that scenario, you can totally forgive, right? I mean, Prescott, he was in his first playoff game. Like, Aaron Rodgers was red hot at the time. It's still a disappointment, but you can forgive it. And it was a close game. It ended up being kind of a coin flip game. Could have gone either way, even with Prescott having a down start to the game, because he had a great second half. This game was just a disaster from the start. I mean, I know Prescott had a bunch of empty calorie-esque plays at the end to give him 400 yards, but he was not good in this game. Prescott was terrible, and the defense was terrible. So the Cowboys as a whole completely choked. They were over a touchdown favorites, and they got smoked in this game. I mean, that's brutal for several reasons, right? Like, if you were 7.5-point underdogs and you get smoked, we'd still kind of sit here and say, it's still kind of a choke, right? I mean, you still lost. Like, that's still not good. All that stuff. Well, in this scenario, I mean, it's just the fact that they were favored by that much the fact that they were favored by that much and lost by that much is just, it was terrible. Probably their worst choke of the Prescott era. So, is Dak Prescott a choker? That's kind of the question. Yeah, a little bit. I mean, you're looking at, the 5 losses. I think it's fair to say that 2 of them, they were underdogs. Hard to choke when you're underdogs. You can do it, but it's hard to. But 3 of them, they were favored to win, and a couple of them by more than a field goal. Only one of them was a field goal. And so it's like, that's a tough situation. And in the games that they're underdogs, only 1 victory as an underdog so far. So, they underperform in the playoffs. It's a real thing at this point. Not every year have they underperformed in the playoffs, but enough years to say that it is. And they haven't had a year where they've overperformed to make up for the underperformance in other years, right? Like, if you have one year where you're supposed to go to the Super Bowl and get knocked out in the wildcard round, but another year where you're supposed to get knocked out in the wildcard round and go to the Super Bowl, well, then that's kind of just, that's still average stuff. They haven't had a run like that yet. So, and it's just an interesting situation. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on all of this. What are your thoughts? Let me know in the comments below. Always love hearing from you. And, of course, as always, thanks for watching.